unlike any figure from the 20th century. If you want to see a lover, you see a lover. If you want to see a fighter, you see a fighter. If you want to see a saint, you'll see a saint. If you want to see a sinner, you see a sinner. Poet, prophet, whatever you want to see.
Thank you so much for speaking with Pop Culture today. I'm very excited to speak to you. I got a chance to watch the first two episodes of the docuseries, and I feel like this is really the first project that really delves deep into Afeni's life and upbringing to really uncover the parallels that she shares with Tupac in terms of their brilliance as well as their complexities. And as a Tupac fan and someone who adores Afeni as well, I've never really seen her stories told in that way. So how does having a side-by-side account of their lives set up the audience's understanding of them and their trajectory as revolutionaries?
Well, I think it's everything because, again, what do we really know about Afeni's journey? And how could we know about Tupac without knowing where he's from and what he was born into, born out of? And particularly when you know that he was gestating in her womb in the prison for 8 months. And he was born 1 month after she got acquitted of the Panther 21 trial in New York City, after representing herself in court. So I think listen, when I signed on to do this, everyone's like, well, we've seen Tupac, another story about Tupac. You're like, well, actually, his story's never really been told. I'm a storyteller, so I know, right? Like when someone's story's been told, and there's a bunch of murder documentaries about him or conspiracy things. And then there was the one that was decent because it was done in his own voice, Resurrection.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a debate about the feature film I'm not going to get into. But, I know the family wasn't satisfied, and they were very happy to hear that my take was to do a multiple part dual narrative with the two of them.
Well, you did a phenomenal job, and a lot of people who are Tupac fans, which I think that the documentary does a good job at exploring as well, is that people have analyzed Tupac's work as him having a dual personality, right? With him as being like this poet and being Black and proud. And then I guess you can say this commercialized like Death Row Records character who gave into like sexism and misogyny. And I don't feel as if there's ever really been an in-between. And the docuseries is a good exploration of that. And a lot of people also that were interviewed in the docuseries gave varying takes on when they feel like they saw that switch. What do you think happened to cause such a stark contrast?
Particularly with the last year of his life,
Mm-hmm.
there was a lot of things that happened, and I think most of them are in the film. I think when he went to prison, he was raging on the fact that he felt that he wasn't getting support out of the East Coast, and they were after him in general out here. Weird because he's a New Yorker, but no one really knows that, right? And
Or just
and
East Coaster in general, like
yeah,
Baltimore.
that's true. That's true. I think he felt not appreciated for the good work he did. You can hear him in the documentary say, "I didn't win no awards for Dear Mama or Brenda's Got a Baby." No one. He knew the fans loved it, but he didn't feel like he was getting main stream love for it. And you're sitting in prison, you're feeling vulnerable. All this stuff has been happening in your life, and you're like, I need. He wanted to feel protected too. And at the time, it was like the mob in hip hop. What crime family are you going to sign up for just for your protection? That's the way it really was. And I think we have to keep in mind that here's a young man that was living in poverty most of his adolescence, and now he's a rock star. Now he's a sex symbol. He's only 25. I just think it was a part of his life. He's just like, I'm giving into the excess of it all, which was meant to be just a phase. Because he definitely, I've learned, told everyone he's getting back to Brenda's Got a Baby and Keep Your Head Up, but on some other level, a new level, shed so many tears. So his plan was to leave this persona behind, and unfortunately, this persona is the one that probably ended his life, or we know did.
That was actually going to be a follow-up question of mine, is that his ending was very tragic, obviously. And some say that he brought death upon himself by speaking it or rapping it or in certain aspects of his behavior. And you kind of touched on it with your answer. But what is your take on that?
Well, by everyone's account around him, he was never long for these days, and he was aware of it. And I call it emotional math. You're like 1 + 1 = 2. If you're moving like this and you continue to move like this, what's the expression that's been popular now? Uh, Around and find out. That's and with him, even when I knew him, especially after our incident, the year after it, and I saw what was going on with him before he went to prison. I said, "This is you." If you knew him, you knew you're like, this isn't gonna end well, because he literally would run into fires. He would run into shootouts. He would run into kerfuffles. Like I never knew anyone that would just run right into the eye of the storm like that.
Mhm.
Constantly too. I'm talking about weekly.
Now, getting back to showcasing Afeni, and I spoke a little bit about the misogyny aspect of some of his behavior, his music. And it's very interesting because fans of him know, his affection and his admiration that he had for his mother. And I feel like he had this empathy, but also obviously anger that he may have harbored because of some of the decisions that she made or her struggle with addiction. And in the series, there was actually a clip of him that I thought was really cute, where he was in high school expressing, how he desires to treat women with the utmost respect. And then he kind of changed a little bit when he realized that the women that he were going after that didn't necessarily want him back. And then we see later kind of the same themes in his music where he has the keep your heads up, the keep your head ups, and the Brenda's got a baby. And then, you can turn around and write hit him up, even though we know that was an extreme example, right?
No
But
doubt.
from what you gathered with Afeni, how did she react to his emotional roller coaster in the way that he spoke publicly about women?
I think she was living in real time and struggling with it as well. But also, I think Afeni understood what it was, and I think she had a. This is just me. I didn't get this from the family, but well, maybe it is in the film. She felt some guilt too when it came to him, and the time she was there, and the time she wasn't there, and the time she made certain decisions that affected her children. She talks about in the film. Um, so when it comes to what we now call toxic masculinity, I think Afeni was able to do the math and understand what it was
Mm-hmm.
more so than probably we do, did. And now, with this film, I've come to understand what it, why that metamorphosis took place. I think she knew in real time what was going on with her son. Whether she liked it or not is another story.
Now, his ascension was very quick. When you think about it, he created his legacy within like 5 years, despite his flaws. And he's very much up there with the Elvis Presleys and the Michael Jacksons of the world, even though his career was much shorter, compared to theirs. What do you attribute his staying power to?
A couple things. You could feel him. You can feel his passion in any language. You wonder when you go around the world, Africa, Asia, South America, Europe, and you see that mural everywhere. You know, and you go, oh, he's become a global symbol for rebellion. You see the children's soldiers in Africa. Um, uh, Mike Tyson talks about it, listening to Tupac. There's an image of in our movies, kids are like 12 years old with machine guns. They got Tupac shirts on. But I think the real reason outside of the fact of the poetry and the music, when you look at Brenda's Got a Baby and you look at Dear Mama, we just take those two. And my personal favorite is Shed So Many Tears. You go, who before him was as a young man writing songs like that, and who after him ever wrote songs like that? So there's the real meaningful part of his journey and his thoughtful side and his poetic side. But I think the thing that I realized recently that makes him almost biblical is that you can project whatever you want into him. Unlike any figure from the 20th century. If you want to see a lover, you see a lover. If you want to see a fighter, you see a fighter. If you want to see a saint, you'll see a saint. If you want to see a sinner, you see a sinner. Poet, prophet, whatever you want to see, like the Bible, Tupac will be that for you. And that's because he was available to whatever emotion he was in. That's what made him unique. As a young man, too, most men aren't even in touch with their emotions, let alone completely. I've seen Tupac cry on a dime. and not sit there and feel shame about it. I don't know any men that in my life that were able to do that, you know. So that's, you know, I think we as human beings, whether you're a fan or not, you can feel that in him. Even in the movie, when you get to the part where you see him perform and hit him up on stage, you're like, holy shit, I'm feeling this dude. I don't agree,
But you
but yo,
respect it.
you got to respect that. Whatever that is, like, I'm feeling you, dude. That's why we talk about it.
Now, you mentioned toxic masculinity, and that is like such a buzzword or phrase nowadays. Even though that was only one side to the various sides of Tupac Shakur. How do you think he would be perceived in today's society? Do you think he would be viewed as an equally controversial figure as he was back then? Or do you think we're much more progressive now in the way that we take personalities like him in?
You mean if he was alive and moving like
Yes.
that today, he
Yes.
wouldn't be able. He wouldn't be able to move like that. That part, you know, that I'm talking about. That not that there are current hip hop artists that I have to work out to, Rick Ross or whatever. You're like, you know, I'm hearing certain things on those records, right? Um, I don't think Tupac would, if he had lived, I think he would have grown to become greater in all aspects. So I don't think he would have been limited to anything that can be labeled toxic masculinity. I think he would be laughing about the records he made back then. I'm sure proud of some, even in the darker periods, some of the work he did. But I'm sure he looked back and go, I can't believe I did that, because that's not who he truly represented, and how he was truly raised and what was instilled in him. But his part of his progression as a man, as he said. And when you get cut down to 25, there's no more progressing, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm. Now, you mentioned that you had your own negative run-in with Tupac, we all know, but you still opted to do the docuseries and you did it so beautifully. So how would you describe your personal journey of reconciling your past issues with him in order to create this project in an objective way?
That's a great question, and probably the most challenging thing with the film. Not because I was never going to harm him or his legacy, or as a human being, because I don't operate out of hate. You know, I operate out of love and wanting to understand, and that's why I did this project. But I guess I didn't. I kind of muted whatever trauma I had from that incident, and I definitely didn't want to be a part of the film. That part, maybe in passing, someone mentioning it, but my partner and producers kept going, "No, you got to deal with this. You know, this is the elephant in the room. If you don't deal with it, you're not being transparent." I'm like, well, I mean, I'll talk about the interviews. They're like, no, no. And I kept rejecting it. And then it naturally came up in an interview where his manager, Adrian Gregory, challenged me. And his first manager, Layla Steinberg, who you've seen, she was on set too. And they both kind of triangulated on me. So because that had happened and it was natural, I go, you know what? And I call it like you black out. Like, sometimes when you're doing your best work, or you're at your best, you just go into a zone. I don't, and it didn't feel false to me. It felt genuine, and I had to be very aware of the fact too. I'm like, yo, Alan, he's not here. So you really can't say, don't judge this. Like, I gotta give into it, and I gotta acknowledge, my role in this and where I may have been wrong. And now know, yeah, there was a misunderstanding there, but when you have those young boys, those highly charged egos, a lot got lost in the translation, and he was having a hard time adjusting to fame, I think, as well, and those responsibilities. So that was the toughest thing in this piece. Outside of, by the way, all of it was tough, but I've come to have a lot of compassion for him that I don't think I had before.
When we talked about his cultural impact, and obviously, despite his short career, here we are, 2023, still talking about him, and there's so many other projects that his estate has undertaken. I was speaking prior to you getting on about, visiting his exhibit last year in LA around this time, and how as a fan, I knew that it would be great, but I didn't expect it to be extraordinary in the way that it was. And there's always new films coming out. There's always new merchandise coming out. We're still getting, you know, music that's being released all these years later. And at least in hip hop, there hasn't been anyone who has had that impact. So, is there any artist who has taken or has the potential to take the baton from where Tupac left off that you can see now?
No, no. It's another lane, but I think the the thing I love about Snoop is you see him, you smile, whether it's your grandma, whether it's a old Frenchman or a little kid, and you see that he got to progress as a man and grow, and he's become such a sage. Snoop, he's such a wise soul that is available to listen to. He's a very good listener, so that you'll see as the journey goes on in the film, his presence in this film represents what you just said, and hope in the positive of it. Like we don't have to lose Snoop to love Snoop, you know. So any of the current artists, if they get cut down early, I can't imagine what. And those who haven't, and I hate to be provocative here, but like you see our guy, what happened with Kanye, just like, yo, what side of the game is that? What part of the game is that, dude? Like, you know, you can't chalk this up to your progression as a man at 25. You're 45.
Mm-hmm.
So I think today's culture is such a self-obsessed culture, and we're so wired that way with the TikToks and the social media and the phones that the poets, like true poets in this medium, you know, Kendrick, yeah, yeah, okay, give me a couple other ones. I know they're out there, but that have risen to that, you know.
And ultimately with this project, as I mentioned, I was just I don't I mean of course proud, but I guess excited, and I feel like I learned a lot specifically for Afeni. I mean,
Yeah.
I can write a book about Tupac, but you know, his mom is something different, and we, you know, we knew that she was a part of the Panthers, and we knew some of her personal struggles, but as I mentioned, for it to be told in this way has
Mm-hmm.
been unprecedented. So
Mm-hmm.
thank you for that.
Oh,
And
thank you.
ultimately, what do you want viewers to take away from this dual narrative?
I think I just want them to understand the human being now as Tupac, and I want Afeni to be the revelation. Like, oh wow, who's this rock star? You know, and how authentic she was. Um, and you know what? There's a way to have morals and ideals and still get your paper. You know, I think you should walk away from this movie and go, you know what? It does pay. I see they suffered uh, early and sometimes a little later, in her case, uh, for their values, as you said, their ideals. It doesn't pay, you
Mm-hmm.
know. But now we know. No, you know that's what's missing from today's culture, modern times. Is like leaders and artists that truly stand for something and aren't afraid of like speaking out against anything. Everything's got so crazy to the right and obviously crazy. Then you have the left too that's got a little out of hand, way over there too. You know, and everyone's in between is kind of like, oh, I don't want to. I don't. You're gonna tell me I'm like whatever, and you're just nuts. So everyone's petrified. So I hope that people can watch this film and remember a time when artists and human beings, just civilians, which was what Afeni was at the time, outside of being a Black Panther, when they represented something and stood for something just and moral and righteous. I hope when you watch this film, you go, oh, that's how Roe versus Wade got overturned. We all took our eye off the ball. We all got complacent. No one's out here fighting for this shit. You got all these whack jobs on the right, just like evil villains in the movie. Like, yeah, we're gonna keep moving this shit around and moving. They don't stop. They
Mm-hmm.
don't stop. But evil is ceaseless. You know, it's because it's such a greed is a mutation that keeps doing like this. So when you Barack Obama got voted in office, oh yeah, Are we cool now? We are not cool. You know, it's an eternal struggle. That's what I learned through Afeni's journey and sitting down with all those Panthers, those Panther veterans. They said, "Oh no, you don't win. You score victories and you secure the victories and stay vigilant about the victories. But this fight for human rights and social justice is an eternal struggle, an eternal war." And that broke my heart because I was naive enough to think that I might see it in my lifetime. And Tupac said, "I'm not going to see it in my lifetime." And my mother knew she wouldn't see it in her lifetime.
Do you think that was Afeni's ultimate sacrifice? Because the series does a good job at exploring her life, before Tupac, and her talent, and her smarts, and how she viewed the traditional educational system and the lack of opportunities that she had within her surroundings, that basically led her to the Panthers. And then what do you think Tupac's ultimate sacrifice was?
Well, the thing that moved me, Brenda, was everything she stood for and how she got erased and muted because of the trauma. The blessing in it all was, like, he's sacrilegious here, like Christ, I now know the meaning of Tupac's death. Global icon. Now his mother, her hero's journey in the last 20 years, the 20 years after he passed, was, I got to consolidate everything about my son and make sure what he represents is what we represented, what we were fighting for. And that is organic and natural to him. It's who he was. And so the blessing and the whole journey was looking at Afeni's hero's journey. What bigger bat signal can be sent out into the world than Tupac? And for people to look at, that's why I did this thing and go, let's find the melody in his narrative. When you look at Tupac, you better be thinking social justice warrior. If you're thinking toxic this and that, yeah, that happened. That, by the way, let's be real. You want to go dig up MLK skeletons right now?
Yeah, they all have them. Yeah.
And by the way, like, shocking too.
Mm-hmm.
Shocking. So symbols, whether we want to admit it or not, are powerful for young boys and girls. To symbols of hope and beacons of hope and light are what move us. So I don't think we should hide the blemishes, and we don't do it the way we used to in the JFK and MLK days, right? But I think Afeni's journey, she really, I hear, didn't find a lot of peace, but I hope she rests assured now that her son gave her a global megaphone that is felt and will be felt until the end of time.
Well, it has been an honor speaking to you today. It's definitely my top 5. So thank you guys for fitting me in your schedule. I can't wait to watch the last 3 pieces, but it was such a pleasure to talk to you, and well done on this project.
You made my day. Thank you so much for being so thoughtful.